Hello YouTube and fellow members of the DDR, and welcome to another installment of WWW, the weekly Wednesday workshops. This week we'll be teaching you the basics of how to play the Pokemon trading card game. First off, types of cards. Pokemon cards, which are the attackers of your deck. There are 4 different types of Pokemon. Basic Pokemon, which can be put straight onto the bench. Stage 1 Pokemon. In the top left corner, there's a basic Pokemon that this evolves from. You must have had the basic Pokemon on the bench for a full turn and it not be the first turn of the game, then place this card on top to evolve it. Stage 2 Pokemon. In the top left corner is a Stage 1 Pokemon that this evolves from. If the Stage 1 Pokemon has been in play for a full turn, then you can place this card on top to evolve it. Restored Pokemon. These are fossil Pokemon. You can only put these onto your bench with the aid of the corresponding fossil trainer card. Trainer cards. Trainers consist of items to aid your Pokemon, supporters, which can be used once per turn, tools that equip to your Pokemon, maximum of 1 tool per Pokemon, and stadiums that both you and your opponent can utilize. Energy cards. In order to use your Pokemon's attacks, it will need energy. Once per turn, you can attach 1 energy to one of your Pokemon. The amount of energy attached to your Pokemon determines which of its attacks that it can use. The energy requirement of each attack is written on the card. The energy pictured needs to match the energy attached to your Pokemon in order to use its attacks, though any type of energy can be used for a colorless symbol. Note, when you use a Pokemon's attacks, the energy stays attached. Different types of energy. Grass energy. Pokemon that use grass energy often have attacks that heal themselves or further damage their opponents by status conditions such as poison. Fire energy. Fire-type Pokemon are capable of burning their opponent and have high-powered attacks, but often require discarding energy to use their attacks. Water energy. Pokemon that use water energy can manipulate energy and manipulate the opponent's Pokemon. Lightning energy. Lightning Pokemon utilize paralysis, can get energy back from the discard pile, and often damage themselves in their attacks. Psychic energy. Pokemon that use psychic energy are capable of many special conditions, including sleep, confusion, and poison. Fighting energy. Fighting Pokemon take bigger risks for more powerful attacks, and often use coin flips for extra damage. Darkness energy. Darkness Pokemon use sneaky attacks and often manipulate the opponent's hand. Metal energy. Metal-type Pokemon can resist attacks and take damage for longer than most Pokemon. There are also colorless Pokemon which can be used in any deck, and Dragon-type Pokemon which tend to use a combination of different energies. Additionally, there is Fairy-type, which is being released in the coming months. Or years, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine.
Game zones. First off, the hand. These are any cards you draw and haven't played to the field yet. At the start of the game, both players will draw 7 cards, then place a basic Pokemon from their hand face down as their active Pokemon. If a player has no basic Pokemon, they show their hand to their opponent, then shuffle it back into their deck and draw 7 new cards. For each time a player has to do this, their opponent may draw 1 extra card. Next up is your deck. Each Pokemon deck must contain exactly 60 cards. At the start of a game, you shuffle up your deck and place it on the right side of the field. At the start of the game, each player draws 7 cards, and on each of your turns, even if you go first, you draw a card at the very start of the turn. If you are unable to do so due to having no cards left in your deck, you lose the game. Active Pokemon. In the middle of your field will be your active Pokemon. You must have an active Pokemon to start the game, and anytime your active Pokemon is knocked out, you need to choose a Pokemon from your bench to replace it before the game can continue. If you cannot, your opponent wins the game. Bench. Your benched Pokemon sit behind your active Pokemon, and are there to replace your active Pokemon if need be. You can have a maximum of 5 Pokemon on the bench. At the start of the game, after you've chosen your active Pokemon, you can choose any other basic Pokemon in your hand to place onto your bench, which are also placed face down. Also, only your active Pokemon may perform attacks, as your bench Pokemon are still sitting in their Pokeballs waiting, but they can still use their abilities. Next up is the discard pile. This is usually directly below your deck, and is where any items and supporters go after they've been used, any knocked out Pokemon, cards discarded from your hand, and generally anything else that leaves play. When a Pokemon is knocked out, all cards attached to it go to the discard pile too. Prize cards. After both players have set up their active Pokemon and benched Pokemon, you will both take the top 6 cards of your deck and place them face down on the left side of the field. These are your prize cards, and whenever you knock out an opponent's Pokemon, you get to take one of these cards. Once you've taken all 6 prizes, you win the game. Alrighty, how to play. First off, the win conditions. You win when you pick up all 6 of your prize cards, if your opponent is out of Pokemon on their field, or if your opponent can't draw a card at the start of their turn. Starting off. Firstly, both players shuffle their decks and draw 7 cards. Then, if you have any basic Pokemon in your hand, place one face down as your active Pokemon. If you don't, reveal your hand to your opponent, then shuffle your hand back into your deck and draw a fresh 7. For each time you have to do this and your opponent doesn't, they get the option to draw an extra card. Next, if you have any other basic Pokemon in your hand, you may choose up to 5 of them to put face down on the bench. After that, put the top 6 cards of your deck face down onto the left side of your field for your prize cards. Then you and your opponent will flip a coin. The winner of the coin flip gets to choose who goes first. Note, there is only upside to going first, so usually the winner of the flip will choose to go first. Then, all face down Pokemon, not your prize cards, are flipped face up and the game begins. Parts of a turn. First step, draw a card. Second step, in any order, you may put basic Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, evolve your Pokemon, as long as it's not your first turn and as long as you didn't play the Pokemon you're trying to evolve this turn, attach energy to one of your Pokemon, only 1 energy per turn, play trainer cards, as many as you like, though only 1 supporter and 1 stadium may be played per turn. Use your Pokemon's abilities, each ability will say how often it may be used per turn. And or retreat your active Pokemon. You may only retreat or attempt to retreat once per turn. Step 3. Attack. Remember, you need the right amount and right colour of energy to use a Pokemon's attacks. And always think carefully when deciding to attack, because once you've declared an attack, the effects of the attack are applied and then your turn immediately ends. Retreating your Pokemon. Each Pokemon has a retreat cost at the bottom of their card. If you wish to send your active Pokemon to the bench, you have to pay its retreat cost. To pay the retreat cost, you must discard an energy card attached to that Pokemon for each star in the retreat cost. Once you have successfully retreated, you must choose a Pokemon that was on your bench to become your new active Pokemon. Weakness and Resistance. At the bottom of each Pokemon card is that Pokemon's weakness and resistance. Always make sure to keep an eye on this because it can heavily impact the outcome of a game. If a Pokemon of the type it is weak against attacks a Pokemon, any damage that would be dealt is doubled. Similarly, if a Pokemon is attacked by a Pokemon of a type that it is resistant to, 20 damage is subtracted from the attack. Next up is status conditions. Only your active Pokemon can be affected by a status condition. As soon as your active Pokemon goes to the bench, all status conditions are removed from it. Sleep. Turn your Pokemon counterclockwise to show that it is asleep. While asleep, a Pokemon cannot attack or retreat. If your Pokemon is asleep, in between turns you must flip a coin. If it comes up heads, your Pokemon wakes up and the sleep condition is removed. Paralysis. Turn your Pokemon clockwise if it is paralyzed. While paralyzed, a Pokemon cannot attack or retreat. At the end of your turn, paralysis is automatically removed. Confusion. Turn your Pokemon a full 180 degrees so it faces towards you if it is confused. A confused Pokemon may still attack and retreat, though at a risk. When a confused Pokemon attempts to attack, you must flip a coin. If it comes up heads, the attack is successful. If it comes up tails, the attack fails, and your Pokemon hits itself for 30 damage. Poison. If your Pokemon is poisoned, place a poison marker on it. In between turns, each poisoned Pokemon takes 10 damage. Burn. If your Pokemon is burned, place a burn marker on it. In between turns, the owner of the burned Pokemon flips a coin. If you flip heads, nothing happens. If you flip tails, however, your burned Pokemon takes 20 damage. So that's how you play the Pokemon trading card game. I strongly suggest people look into it. It's seriously one of the most fun TCGs I've ever played. As a warning though, the starter decks that you can pick up are built entirely different to the deck structure used for competitive decks, so keep that in mind. In a couple of weeks I'll cover this further in a Pokemon TCG deck building video, so keep an eye out for that, and you can build up a strong Pokemon deck and see just how fun this game is. If you have any questions, please leave them in our comment section below. Is there a topic you'd like us to cover in WWW? Let us know. We've got a bunch of ideas for videos coming up, but we're always open to suggestions. Thanks for tuning in for another week of WWW. We'll see you here, same time and place, next week. Bye-zy.